You might know this story from the movie Gladiator. In the movie, there's a scene where the young Emperor Commodus lives in luxury, while his gladiator mother, Lucilla, tries to keep an eye on him. Tales of mothers and sons locked in bitter feuds, killing each other or trying to kill each other for being in each other's way. And now back to our story. Now, as for how those mushrooms got into his dinner, well, that's a whole other story which we will tell you right after this. But what we remember about these stories today is rarely their complexity. We think of them as simple tales of monstrous matricide, where a young hero slays his wicked mom because they were evil or insane or both. But for Nero, his mother was a constant embarrassment. You see, while she was only 35 when Nero took the throne, she had already had quite the life. After divorcing her first husband, she married her uncle, the emperor, and he really hated that everyone thought he couldn't assert any dominance over his mother. Tiberius then divorced him, then married her second cousin, Nero's father, Drusus, and then after he died, she married her stepson, the aforementioned Emperor Claudius, who had been born with a club foot and was considered an unlikely candidate to rule. He liked nothing more than throwing gold coins from a tower, watching the common folk fight over the riches. But as the crowds cheered for the murder of the hated empress, a part of Nero cried. But that's not really the point of this video. Instead, we want you to ask yourself why Nero didn't just kill his mother right after he became emperor. Nero could have easily admitted that he wanted to kill her and fought his mother to the death. But instead, he decided to try one last time. And this time, he went all out. He didn't want to risk another failure, so he did something different. We mean, he clearly had opportunities, and she had done plenty of horrible things that would justify a murder. He was obviously distraught, and yet he acted bravely, as if he had done nothing wrong. But the people of Rome weren't fooled. Every time they saw him, they heard their mother's screams. And from that day forward, Nero was haunted by the memory of the woman who brought him into the world. But as soon as the ship pulled away from the shore and into the middle of the sea, Nero signaled for the sailors to crack the ship open. Water poured into Agrippina's chambers, smashing the walls and making a hole in the hull. She ripped off her golden ornaments and jewelry, dropped them into the water, jumped in after them and swam to shore, but Nero was finished with her. That night, he had assassins break into her villa and kill her. And according to history, the assassins stabbed Agrippina over 20 times. But she still refused to yield. She wouldn't die. So finally, when she looked up at one of her attackers and saw a dagger aimed at her heart, she reportedly said, "Strike here, in my womb, the place that bore this monster." And that's exactly what they did. Well, the truth is that Nero waited over a year before killing Agrippina. And during that time, he tried to kill her 3 different times. And one day he decided that he would host the party of a lifetime. The servants and courtiers ate alongside her and would have died if Agrippina hadn't noticed a strange taste in the food and spit it out. Then Nero tried again by lulling his mother into his bedroom at night, planning to smother her with a pillow while she slept. But once again, Agrippina managed to escape, stumbling onto the balcony just in time to watch the entire room fall apart. But every time he tried to carry out his plan, Agrippina outsmarted him. She dodged his ambush and found her way out of his bedroom. In fact, after the second assassination attempt, she confronted Nero and asked him what he was doing. "Is this how you treat the woman who bore you?" she asked. And Nero lied and said that he had simply wanted to apologize for insulting her earlier. He gathered all the most important people in Rome, including his own grandmother, Julia Misa, and hosted a grand feast in their honor. Everyone drank and danced until late into the night, and then they watched as Nero and his mother appeared on stage. Then the young emperor turned to the crowd and announced that he was going to marry a woman named Poppaea Sabina. Now Poppaea was a divorcee and the mother of a child, which meant she wasn't good enough for the emperor. So as she stood there listening to Nero's declaration, Agrippina shook her head. "I do not approve of this marriage," she said loudly, startling everyone. This was supposed to be Nero's moment, and here his mother was ruining it. He threw a tantrum like a spoiled child, screaming at her that she wouldn't stop him from marrying the woman he loved. But as the party raged on, Nero kept glancing at his mother, unsure of what to do next. Eventually, he excused himself from the festivities and went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. All he could think about was his mother's betrayal and how he had to do something about it. He grabbed a dagger and crept into her room, just as he had done countless times as a child, except this time he was no longer there to He plunged the dagger into his mother's chest and watched as she slowly bled to death. So, despite her complicated family tree, she was fairly successful, all because she was exceptionally skilled at manipulating people. Unfortunately, she had passed these skills on to her son, but since he was a boy when she died, Agrippina raised Nero herself. And now that he was in charge of the entire Roman Empire, she still felt that she was running things. She controlled everything he read, attended every meeting with foreign dignitaries, and even picked out his wives. There were limits to Nero's authority, and his mother was the limit. Naturally, they turned to the deceased emperor's family, and so it was that his older brother, Nero, along with Nero's mother, Agrippina the Younger. And while Agrippina might have laughed along with everyone else, deep down she knew that the real joke was on Nero. And Claudius, his widow, Valeria Messalina, all entered the Senate with their respective claims, and we do and mean to question anything about Nero's sexuality, except for how he may have felt about his mother. Because it turns out that there are a lot of stories which describe Nero and Agrippina's relationship in a rather disturbing light. According to these stories, the two would embrace for long moments, share a single bed, and even take baths together. Of course, Agrippina could argue that she was simply a loving mother, but she didn't help her case when she asked the Senate to build her a lavish bath house inside the palace so that she and Nero could bathe together. Nero was younger than the other two and certainly lacked experience, but as the deceased emperor's biological nephew, he had a claim of blood. Messalina argued that as the widow, the throne was rightfully hers, and Agrippina argued that as the mother of Nero, it was her duty to ensure he became the next emperor. To sweeten the deal, she pointed out that she could also bring a lot of wealth to the empire because of her dowry, and seeing as she was already acting as regent for her son, as well as being extremely beautiful, the Senate agreed that she and Nero were the best option to rule Rome. But after she warns him against abusing his power, he orders her arrest, and she's taken away to die. But that isn't the end of her story, because when he takes the throne, Commodus is haunted by guilt, unable to enjoy the power he has stolen for himself. The truth is, history is full of stories like this one. But before we look at the madness of men who killed their mothers, let's get our own mother out of the way. Let's talk about sponsors. It is 54 AD, and the Roman Emperor Claudius has just died after choking on some poisonous mushrooms. After Claudius's death, the Senate met to discuss who should be the next emperor, and this is how Rome ended up with a teenage emperor and an extremely ambitious mother. Now, normally, if your mother helped you win the throne, you'd probably think that she deserved some credit and maybe a statue or two. As a result, the joke spread throughout Rome that the empire itself now wore a woman's face. Now, a lot of historians think that Nero loved his mother very much, even though he might have also been gay and had an interest in men. So while we can't say exactly what sort of relationship the two had, we can safely say that Nero hated feeling like he couldn't assert any dominance over his mother. So he decided that he needed to teach Rome a lesson. You see, Nero was fond of parties. Nero later told people that his mother had insulted him, that he hadn't wanted to live under her thumb anymore. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might be thinking to yourself that Agrippina was a scheming, manipulative woman who might have had an inappropriate relationship with her own son, and that she deserved whatever she got. The first attempt happened when Nero invited his mother to dinner and served her a plate of poisonous mushrooms. Now, this could have been the end of the story. He had her bedroom ceiling rigged with ropes and weights, planning to make it collapse on top of her. But Nero was done with his mother. He didn't care if she escaped every time he tried to kill her. One day, he invited her on a tour of his luxurious new ship. The next morning, Nero walked the palace, halls pale and shaking. His eyes were sunken and dark. Thanks for watching.